Yukiya is a shy but stubborn boy who hides his feelings behind a teasing game, especially around Miku, his playful and confident childhood friend. What started as a teasing game between them has slowly turned into something more, as neither of them wants to admit their real emotions. Now, as they enter high school, their game continues, but deep down, both are waiting for the other to finally be honest. The show starts at a cafe, where Yukiya suddenly finds himself thinking back to something he once considered completely ridiculous. And as he watches Miku casually tease him like always, he remembers how their strange I love you game first began all the way back in 6th grade, when the two of them decided that whoever got flustered first after saying I love you would lose, even though at the time he thought it was the dumbest idea ever. Even so, despite how pointless it seemed back then, and honestly still seems now, 4 whole years have passed, and somehow neither of them has managed to win, which only makes the situation more absurd, especially since everyone around them has started treating their endless back and forth like some kind of ongoing show. Meanwhile, during their usual conversation, the topic naturally shifts into another argument, as Yukiya accuses Miku of being the one who gets embarrassed too easily, while Miku immediately fires back, claiming he's the real problem. And although their bickering sounds serious on the surface, it carries that familiar rhythm that shows just how used to each other they are. However, as the conversation continues, Miku suddenly points out that at the rate they're going, the game might never actually end, and before Yukiya can respond properly, she casually brings up how he looked earlier when he confessed, which catches him completely off guard and causes his face to turn red almost instantly. Because of that, Miku doesn't miss the opportunity to tease him even more, while Yukiya quickly tries to recover by insisting that it doesn't count unless other people notice his reaction, arguing that only she saw it, so it shouldn't be considered a loss, even though his flustered expression says otherwise. At the same time, not far from them, Hanako watches the exchange with quiet interest, and as she listens to their conversation, she begins to realize that whatever game they're playing now is clearly different from what it used to be, which prompts Masaru, the cafe owner, to explain that the rules have changed over time, allowing them to do more than just say, I love you, in order to make the other person react. Because of that explanation, both Hanako and Masaru become even more invested, especially since it's already obvious to them that Yukiya and Miku aren't just playing a game anymore, but are actually stuck in a situation where neither of them is willing to admit their true feelings, which makes them quietly look forward to the day something finally changes. Not long after that, Miku checks the time and realizes she needs to leave, and as she stands up, she casually tells Yukiya that she hopes they'll end up in the same class during the entrance ceremony the next day, which causes him to instinctively hide his feelings by acting like it doesn't matter to him at all. However, once Miku walks out and disappears from view, Yukiya immediately drops the act, and as he sits there alone, his frustration begins to surface, leading him to complain about how she always switches between acting like a brat and suddenly becoming sweet, which only makes her more charming in a way that completely throws him off balance. Because of that, his thoughts gradually drift into the past, and he starts thinking about when his feelings toward Miku first began to change, especially since there was a time when he didn't see her as cute at all and only cared about winning the game as a way to finally beat her at something. But everything shifted during one moment in middle school, when Miku leaned in and softly whispered, I love you to him, and before he could stop himself, his heart reacted in a way it never had before, which Miku immediately noticed as she teased him about it, even though for Yukiya, that moment left a much deeper impression than he was willing to admit. From that moment on, he began to notice small changes, including the way her voice sometimes sounded softer, or how her presence felt different compared to before, which made him realize that she was no longer just the same childhood friend, but someone who was gradually growing into a young woman right in front of him. Because of that realization, even ordinary moments started affecting him more, such as the time she handed him a drink she had already been sipping from, which made him painfully aware that it counted as an indirect kiss, forcing him to quickly hide his embarrassment by finishing it as fast as possible. As those memories continue to surface, Yukiya begins to wonder how things might have turned out if they had never started the game in the first place, since part of him believes that it might be the only reason they've stayed so close all this time, even though he also knows that someday, Miku could end up with someone else if things stay the same. Because of that fear, he eventually reaches a decision, realizing that if Miku ever found out how he truly felt, she would definitely tease him endlessly, which is something he doesn't think he could handle, so instead of confessing directly, he convinces himself that the only way forward is to win the game first. Meanwhile, as he continues thinking about all of this, Hanako casually hands him a glass of water and mentions that his hair looks better since visiting the salon she recommended, which leads him to admit that it helped, even though he still doesn't understand why it hasn't made any difference when it comes to Miku. In response, Hanako bluntly tells him that changing his appearance alone won't be enough if he's still acting immature, pointing out that something deeper needs to change if he really wants to impress someone, which leaves Yukiya quietly reflecting on her words. The next morning arrives soon after, and although Yukiya tries to prepare himself properly for the day, he ends up struggling so much that his sister Wakana has to step in and fix his hair for him, leaving him with just enough time to review the romantic lines he memorized from shoujo manga, even though he feels slightly embarrassed using them. Even so, he reminds himself that he doesn't have a choice, because if he hesitates now, he might regret it later. And although he briefly considers confessing his feelings directly, the uncertainty about how Miku feels stops him, pushing him back toward his original plan of winning the game first. With that in mind, he confidently heads downstairs, ready to put his plan into action. But the moment he steps outside, he freezes when he sees Miku already waiting in front of his gate, which instantly shakes his composure. As he looks at her more closely, he can't help but feel overwhelmed, since she looks completely different in her high school uniform, to the point where he struggles to keep his reaction under control, especially when she playfully spins around as if to show it off. At the same time, Miku notices his reaction right away, and as she watches him struggle, she begins to feel that all her preparation might finally pay off, especially since she has been taking the game seriously for a long time due to her own feelings for him. Because in truth, she has been in love with Yukiya since childhood, and although she has seen his reactions becoming stronger recently, she still isn't satisfied, since she wants him to openly admit that she makes his heart race rather than simply reacting without saying anything. Even so, she has her own moment of weakness, as she notices that Yukiya looks surprisingly good in his uniform, which causes her heart to beat faster as well, although she manages to keep her expression calm thanks to all the mental preparation she did beforehand. As a result, when Yukiya finally looks at her directly, she confidently teases him, while Yukiya, trying not to lose ground, suddenly decides to act bold by cornering her against the wall, pretending to be confident even though his heart is racing just as fast as hers. Because both of them are so focused on maintaining their composure, neither of them fully realizes how flustered the other actually is. Although Miku does notice that he has slightly adjusted his uniform to look cooler, which makes her think he's seriously trying to win today. However, after observing him more closely, she also realizes that he's clearly nervous, which gives her an advantage, prompting her to suddenly reach out and fix his tie, catching him completely off guard and making it difficult for him to respond. Even though Yukiya tries to brush it off, claiming it didn't affect him, he ends up grabbing her hand to prove his point, only for both of them to freeze the moment they make contact, as their hearts react instantly, in a way neither of them can ignore. Because of that, they both scramble to cover up their reactions, blaming each other for the sudden situation, although Yukiya briefly notices that Miku looks unusually shy, something he has never seen before, even as she quickly recovers and returns to teasing him. In response, Yukiya tries to regain control by making a harsh comment about her not being very womanly, which clearly bothers her at first, but instead of arguing, she comes up with an idea to prove him wrong by slightly adjusting her skirt to look more mature. That action immediately flusters him, but instead of falling into her trap completely, he surprisingly reacts seriously by telling her to fix it, pointing out that other people might look at her inappropriately, which momentarily shifts the tone between them. Even though Miku teases him for that reaction, she still ends up fixing her skirt, before asking if his concern means she has already won, since he wouldn't react that way unless he felt something, which leads to another heated exchange between them. However, before things can escalate further, Wakana suddenly appears and reminds them that they'll be late if they don't leave immediately, which forces both of them to drop the argument and start running towards school. As Wakana watches them leave, she quietly notes that despite everything, they haven't really changed at all, still stuck in the same dynamic even as they step into a new stage of their lives. Not long after that, they reach the hill leading up to their school, and even while running, they continue arguing, blaming each other for the situation, with Miku pointing out how hard Yukiya tried earlier and suggesting that he already lost without realizing it. But just as Yukiya is about to argue back, he suddenly stops and lets her run ahead, which confuses her enough to make her turn around, only to find him looking at her with an unusually serious expression that makes her blush again. However, instead of saying anything meaningful, he casually walks past her and claims he was just testing her reaction, which immediately brings them back into their usual rhythm of lighthearted arguing. Finally, when they arrive at school, they check the class assignments together, and although both of them feel relieved and happy to see that they're in the same class, they pretend not to care, maintaining their stubborn attitudes as always. Even so, deep down, both of them make the same quiet promise, believing that this will be the year they finally win the game, without realizing that what they truly want isn't victory, but for the other person to finally admit how they really feel. That marks the end of today's anime recap. If you enjoy the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach a current goal of 10K subscribers.